Leslie,
Yes.
I'm going to do the one from yesterday, Michael McCarter.
Okay, I have it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we will go on the record in cause number D40751, D40753, both Style State versus Michael McCarter. Counsel for the state is present. And Mr. McCarter, is that your full and complete name?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. McCarter, it's my understanding you're going to seek court-appointed counsel. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and I believe the bailiff has given you the affidavit to fill out. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
With the phone number of the indigent defense coordinator?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You'll go ahead and need to sign that and or fill that out and then get it to her. I will have you sign a schedule order in both cases before you leave.
Yes, sir.
And you'll get a copy of that. It'll tell you your next date and time.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So no capias to issue in either of these cases. And just hang tight till those schedule orders get to you, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. That concludes both these hearings. Not yet. Okay. Okay, Leslie, are you ready?
I am. Thank you.
Okay, we'll come out of recess in D37885, 38632 and 38699, all Style State versus Adrian Sullivan. Counsel for both sides is present, defendant's present, and the court will take judicial notice of the pre-sentence investigation that was filed with the court, which does include a summary. It's his criminal history, copies of the offense reports. And I believe that is it, unless there's something I'm missing.
Your Honor, I just wanted to make sure that Mr. Brooks wasn't able to send over those offense reports to me because the file was too large. So he just sent the pre-sentence investigation, but he assured me that the offense reports from the original cases were included with that. So I just wanted to make sure that those are the offense reports that you received.
Yes, it's quite voluminous, to be honest.
Okay.
And Your Honor, was there a the letter from the unsuccessful discharge notification sex offender treatment program included in that? It would have been like a page and a quarter from a Robert Saines, LPC LSOTP-S. I guess that's all of his credentials.
I don't see anything like that.
Now I will just that letter was presented in the original hearing that we had, so I don't think it would have been submitted as a part of the PSI.
Okay.
The state would just like for the court to take judicial notice of that as well, if you have it in your
I recall it.
things.
I do recall that letter, but I don't recall if it was admitted as evidence or if it was just discussed during the revocation hearing. But
Judges,
yes.
It was discussed during the hearing, and I believe at least partially, if not completely, read into the record.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can obviously take judicial notice of the evidence that's already been presented. So how about that?
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, I guess I'll turn over to the state for any additional evidence. And if not, then I'll turn over to the defense.
Well, first, Your Honor, the state would like to address in your ruling, you put that cause number D37885, the court finds the allegations 1 through 10 are true. That case actually only has 9 allegations. However, in cause number D38632, you find the allegations 1 through 9 to be true, and that one actually has 10.
And what was that cause number? I'm sorry.
The second one was D38632. And the first one was D37885. That one has 9. 632 has 10.
Okay. I will, I will look at, make sure I'll revisit that and make sure that that's clear. I may need to do an amended ruling. So it's clear, but I want to go ahead and get to the PSI or the disposition at this time.
Okay. And if I'm in error of that, Your Honor, I apologize. I just want to make sure we had the right things are the right ones.
I understand.
The state doesn't have any witnesses and will wait for closing, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Watkins, I know that you have some witnesses, and I know that Ms. Morgan was sworn in yesterday. I don't know if you wish to call her or if you have an order you're wishing to proceed on.
Your Honor, I'm going to be calling Ms. Rose Sullivan first because she has an appointment that she has to get to. And so I'm going to call her first, and then I'll call Ms. Morgan. But
Okay.
I'd like to give just a brief opening to direct the court's attention to what I want to do.
Okay.
So, Your Honor, as the court's aware, these 3 cases involve an sexual assault of a child, sexual assault of another child, a case that there's 2 counts involved, and a credit card abuse. Mr. Sullivan, although he looks really old, and we discussed that yesterday, that he does look a little more mature than what he is, has just turned 24 years old. So a pretty young man. We think that the court, in considering whether or not to continue him on his deferred adjudication probation in these cases, or to revoke that probation, we would like to direct the court's attention to 3 different areas that we believe are of importance in this case. The first would be the nature of the original charge. And so we'd like to explore some of that. Second would be the type of violations that Mr. Sullivan has engaged in, and some of the reasons and some of the things that he's learned during his probation as a result of those violations. And then the third would be his character in general and his importance to his family and what his future plans are. So we think that that's where the evidence is going to go. Ms. Shirley Morgan comes into play, really not in any one of those 3 things, but she is the sex offender registration officer. And so I think it would also be important to explain to the court what type of registration that Mr. Sullivan is required to do and how he's been handling that since he's been placed on probation back in 2018.
Okay. And with that, I will call, you may call your first witness.
We would call Rose Sullivan. And Rose, if you could click that button, got it there? Thank you.
Yes, I got it.
All right, ma'am, if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
All right, you may proceed.
Ms. Sullivan, how are you related to Adrian?
I'm Adrian's grandmother.
And how old is Adrian?
24.
Just turned 24, correct?
He's turned 24.
All right. And so it's my understanding that you've had custody of him since a very early age. Is that right?
I have custody of him ever since he was 5 months old.
And I take it by the last names that, well, I don't. Your daughter was or is Adrian's mother. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. But she's not really ever been able to be in a position to raise him. Is that correct?
No, she wasn't in
Alright.
no position.
And did Adrian ever have a father in his life?
No, he hasn't.
And he's never known his father. Is that right?
Huh?
He's never known his father. Is that correct?
No, he never known his father.
All right. So, just in general, can you explain to the court what kind of if Adrian has had any health or other special issues in his life growing up?
Yeah, he had the seizures when he was a baby. And he has them now if he gets, real upset. But they was mostly fever related, we thought. And he has asthma.
And is he still take medication or inhaler for that asthma?
Yes, he do.
Does he have any special medications or anything that it takes with respect to the seizures?
He wasn't taking no medicine for seizures. He was taking medicine for his asthma,
Okay.
thyroids, and
Okay. And the inhaler.
and the machine.
Did he also have difficulties relating to his school, including dyslexia?
Yeah, I had problems. He had problems in school.
Okay. And when I say problems at school, we're talking about academically, correct? Like
Yeah.
problems being able to read and do his schoolwork. Is that
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Okay. Does Adrian have a place there at your home to live if he's released from jail and allowed to continue on probation?
Yes.
And who currently lives in your home?
His brother, his family, my daughter, me, and my boyfriend.
Okay. And when you say his family, that means Adrian's family, which would include Barbara and his baby daughter. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What kind of, where do you live?
1317 Hackberry Avenue here in Corsicana.
And is that over by Jester Park off of 24th?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
And how many bedrooms does that house have?
That house has 4 bedrooms.
Okay. And so would Adrian share a bedroom then with Barbara, who's already living there, his fiance, and his baby daughter?
Yes, he will.
And does he have a place to stay there for as long as it takes for him to get on his feet and be able to go out and get a place of his own with his family?
Yes, he is.
All right. And can you tell the court how Adrian is important to your family?
Adrian's, he helps out in the household. He done stayed there before until he find his own place. He helps out.
In what kind of way does he help out?
If I need something moved, if I need, the garbage taken out, he takes that out. He a good cleaner. He cleans.
Does Adrian, have you had an opportunity to observe him before he went to jail with his daughter?
Oh, I can't tell you. Well, he took care of that baby. He took care of that baby 24/7 when he wasn't trying to find a job, going to a job. He took care of that baby.
Did Barbara have some difficulties after the birth of the baby that required Adrian to step up and do more than what normally would be required?
Yes, she was going through depression, the mother.
Right.
Like they say it.
And so was during that time Adrian the primary caretaker of the baby?
Yes, he was.
Just in general, as far as Adrian's disposition, what kind of character does he have? What kind of kid is he?
He's a good kid. I raised him by myself.
Okay.
And I raised them both the boys to the best of my ability.
All right. Do you believe that Adrian has matured over the last couple of years to an extent that would enable him to complete this probation?
Yep, he's matured a whole lot.
Has he matured? Go ahead.
He done matured a whole lot, you know, especially since the baby came.
Okay.
You know, he tries, he's a good father. I see, he loves that baby.
And have you had an opportunity to be in contact with Adrian since he's been in jail on these revocations?
Yes, I talked to him on the phone.
And have you noticed any change in him since he's been in jail?
Yes, a whole lot.
And what do you mean by that?
He just sounds different.
How so?
He wants to do good. He tells me he's gonna do good when he gets out.
Do you feel like he's a more serious person since he's been in jail at this point?
Yep. I think he done learn a whole lot.
All right. And do you believe that Adrian will take responsibility for his probation and for his family if the judge chooses to place him back on probation?
Yes, he will.
Is there anything that you feel like the court should know in making this decision that I haven't touched on?
No, just I raised him to the best of my ability, and he's a good child. You know.
Are you asking the court? Go ahead.
He had, you know, he about him. I don't know if it's the seizures or the asthma or whatever, you know, that upsets him. You know, when a person upsets him, he gets real angry about it.
He's certainly, though, had the ability to redirect that anger and not get involved in assaults and things like that, correct?
No, he ain't gonna get in no assault. You know, no,
Okay.
he'll just get quiet. He gets real quiet, you know. You know, then you don't bother him. You just let him come back.
Are you asking the judge to consider placing Adrian back on probation and give him another chance in these cases?
Yes, I would.
Do you think it's important that he comes back to his family?
Yes, I do. I really do.
I'll pass witness.
Ms. Schumer?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Sullivan, was he living with you in September of 2020, last year? September of last year?
No, he had his own place.
Okay. Do you know who resides at 1337 West 14th Avenue?
That was him and his family.
Okay. And was that where he was residing possibly in September of 2020?
Yes.
Okay. And Barbara Moore, you said the mother of the child lives with you?
Yes, she do.
Is this the same person who lied to the police and told them that somebody broke into that house on 14th Avenue. And when it was actually Adrian who kicked in the door and broke the window, and y'all picked up the grandbaby.
Yeah, I picked up the grandbaby, yes.
Okay, and Barbara Moore is the same person that lied to the police along with Mr. Adrian, Mr. Sullivan, who lied to the police. It really actually wasn't a break-in. They did all this damage themselves, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You say he gets angry. When he gets angry and he gets silent, does he ever just explode and get really upset and do things like break in doors and break windows?
He just gets silent.
Okay. He was given an opportunity while he's been on probation for the last 5 years to get help outside of prison, but he chose not to. Are you saying that if the judge puts him back on probation, the last 5 years are just going to not be an example of his behavior?
His behavior have changed.
Because he's incarcerated?
Before he went incarcerated, he had a
Okay.
daughter.
So in September of 2020, when he broke into the house because he was angry.
He wasn't angry. He was trying to get into the house because Barbara was in there and Barbara was going through changes and the baby was in there. And he was thinking
Okay.
about the baby. He was trying
Why
to get in
didn't-
there to the baby.
Okay. Why didn't you just call the police and have the police come out and handle it?
He wasn't staying with me. He was
Okay,
staying on 14th.
But he chose not to call the police and ask them to come help with his child. He
I don't
decided
know
to break
why
the
he
door.
didn't call the police. I
Okay.
don't know why he didn't call the police. I wasn't there.
You love your son, you love your grandson, Miss Sullivan, yes?
I sure do. Sure
Okay.
do.
If your grandson had a drug addiction, would you want him to get help?
Yeah, I wanted him to get help. If he
If
had
he
a
had
drug,
a-
he don't have one.
If he had an addiction to alcohol, would you want him to get help?
Yes,
Okay. And if he refused to take the help that's given to him, would you continue to say he needs to just continue to be on probation and continue to be there, and continue to be there, and continue to be there?
no,
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Watkins, anything further?
Not of Ms. Sullivan. Ms. Sullivan, may she be excused, Your Honor?
Yes, you're free to go, ma'am. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. You can call your next witness.
Your Honor, I'll call Shirley Morgan.
Okay, and she was sworn in yesterday. You may proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Morgan.
Morning.
Can you introduce yourself to the judge? I'm sure he already knows you, but tell him what you specifically do with the police department.
I'm Shirley Morgan. I worked here for the police department for almost 22 years. I have been the chief's administrative assistant since the day I was hired. And about 15 years ago, I started registering sex offenders to help out the department. And for the last several years, I've been the only one that registers sex offenders that live in the city limits.
In that capacity, Ms. Morgan, and is it Officer Morgan or Ms. Morgan? I'm sorry.
Mrs. Morgan. Yeah.
Okay, Mrs. Morgan. In that capacity, Mrs. Morgan, have you had the opportunity to get to know Adrian Sullivan?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that the Adrian Sullivan that you see there on the screen from the Navarro County Jail?
It's Adrian Keown Sullivan, date of birth 4/21/1997.
And I take, can you see him on your screen or no?
Well, it's real tiny.
Okay. All right. So he is required to register as a sex offender based on these offenses that we're here about as far as a revocation today. Is that correct?
Yes, the first time I registered him was on December 4th, 2017. And At that time, he registered annually. And then on November 14th, 2018, he became a quarterly registrant. That means every 90 days, he has to register with me. He has up to 7 days before the date we set and no more than 7 days after the date. And he has not, that's called a verification. And he's had 11 verifications with me since his first day that I met him. And he's had 20 change of circumstances. Those would be jobs, no job, phone, address, and he has reported to me all of those things and come in and sign the paperwork.
And has he ever missed a registration, or out of all of that, I think you said over 30 different things that he's had to register for, has he ever missed?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
If he had, we would have issued a warrant as soon as possible after the day that his 7 days before and afterward were up, and our detectives would have issued a warrant for him. That has not happened.
And Adrian, one of those changes of circumstances would be like a change of residence. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Change of address, a new job, quitting a job, or any job change. And that's, basically all he had.
What is it also available to sex offenders to call and ask you questions with regard to their registration?
Oh, yes, ma'am. From the first day that I register any sex offender, even if they've registered somewhere else for years, when I get them as a new person to me, I go over everything in detail. And before I go over it, there's a 3-page document called CR32. I give them my business card and my number's also on another card that I give them every time they register. And I tell them that at any time while I'm explaining all the rules and regulations that feel free to stop me and ask me then. And then I tell every single one of them, if you have any questions any other time, feel free to call me. The ones that don't have telephones, they can come up and see me. And I also tell them that I give an example. Sometimes they'll see something on the news that they might think, well, I wonder if that's going to affect me. I encourage them to call and ask questions.
And has Adrian done that periodically over the years, asking questions about his different circumstances and what's required of him?
Yes, a few times.
Okay. And do you know, or do you recall whether Adrian's ever asked you about homelessness and what he would be required to do, and being generally concerned about what he'd need to do if he didn't have a place to live?
Yes, ma'am, and that is in the yearly form, the CR32 from the state of Texas that I go over. And he actually, since I've registered him, he's been homeless one time. That was when he had been evicted out of an apartment, and he moved into he moved from Miss Rose Sullivan's house, and that was on February 28th, 2021. And then on March 23rd, that was February 28th, 2020. And it was about 3 weeks later, on March 23rd, 2020, they kicked him out of the hotel and he moved back in with his grandmother, Rose Sullivan. And he did keep me posted on him being homeless for that short time. And he's always kept me informed on that.
So what particular difficulties does a homeless person have in registration? What are they required to do?
They're required to give me the exact location of where they are staying, whether it's under a bridge or they're staying with someone else temporarily, but it's not a not going to be a permanent location, say they're going to stay with a friend, but that is not the address they're going to register at. They're required to tell me all of those changes, and they also have to check in at least every 30 days to keep me posted on where they are currently staying.
And was Adrian in his time of homelessness, was he concerned about making sure to meet those requirements and getting arrested if he were on the street or not at a place where he was registered?
Yes, ma'am. He knew what the law was. I reminded him of that, and he knows that not to lie to me, and he knows, well, I can't say that that's never happened. I don't know, but I tell all of them that it's very important that they do not lie to me. They tell me the truth no matter what. And he is constantly has been reminded of all of his requirements. Also, every person I register gets a copy of the signed document showing all the laws for Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, Chapter 62.
So it sounds like there are a lot of requirements that he's got to meet, and your testimony is, to your knowledge, he's met all of his requirements.
Yes, ma'am. To my knowledge, he has.
I'll pass the witness.
Ms. Schumer?
I just have one question. Ms. Morgan,
Yes.
I apologize, Officer Morgan.
No, it's Mrs. I'm not
Okay.
a sworn officer.
Thank you.
Fully trained in this and have been for about 15 years.
And we appreciate your service. If a person who is required to register followed almost all of the rules, they follow most of them, but not all of them, would they still be in trouble?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor.
No.
That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Morgan, I think you're free to go. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, Judge.
Have a good day.
You too, thank you.
Any other witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, we call Barbara Moore.
How do I unmute this?
You're
It's already,
unmuted.
you're
Oh,
already unmuted.
Okay, ma'am, can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
yes, sir.
All right, you may proceed.
Good morning, Barbara. Could you introduce yourself to the court?
Yes, my name is Barbara Moore. I am 19 years old, and I'm Adrian's fiance and also the mother of our child.
And you are about to turn 20, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And it's my understanding that you've been with Adrian since you were 18, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the two of y'all have, well, you said you were his fiance. Are you planning on getting married?
Yes, ma'am.
And when are y'all planning on doing that?
Hopefully in the summer, if our daughter's walking by then.
And how, tell the judge about your daughter.
I will say this. Our daughter is probably one of the best things that has happened to me in my whole life so far. I will admit I have had troubles in my past, but since I've gotten with Adrian and since I've had this child, I've learned to mature. I've learned to do better in life and focus on my future.
Let me stop you right there. So what's the baby's name?
Harmony Rose Sullivan.
And how old is she?
She is 11 months
And where do you guys live right now?
at 1317 Hackberry Avenue.
And is that with Miss Sullivan?
Yes, ma'am.
And how long have you lived there with the baby?
I've lived there probably about 3 months now.
And tell the court, in your opinion, is Ms. Sullivan committed to you and the baby and Adrian and helping you guys establish your family and get on your feet?
Absolutely.
And is she committed to Adrian to help him as well?
Yes, ma'am. Most definitely.
So there's been a little testimony from Ms. Sullivan about some difficulties that you had when Harmony was first born.
Yes.
Can you tell the court what kind of difficulties you had when Harmony was first born, and how Adrian was able to step up or not and help out with that?
Yes, I was very recently after I had my daughter, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. That is actually normal for my depression that I've had in the past. There has been multiple episodes that I had after Harmony's birth. I would constantly be angry or upset or depressed. I'd shut everybody out. And Adrian would just come in there and he'd always tell me, just go lay down. I'll take care of her. I mean, he'd stay up till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and constantly just be up and taking care of that kid. I mean, I don't know a lot of men that would do that. And he stepped up a lot, more than I could even imagine. I really am thankful for that.
Did you also have a C-section after birth?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, the baby was born by C-section, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And did that pose some difficulties as far as physically caring for the baby?
Yes, I had to heal, but I was stubborn. I always wanted to move around. So I was in a lot of pain for about, I think it was about 6 weeks, something like that.
So would it be safe to say that Adrian was the primary caretaker of Harmony during that time that you were recovering from the C-section, and then also because of your postpartum depression?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you characterize him as a dad?
Absolutely.
Tell the court about how he is as a dad with Harmony.
Oh my God, where do I begin? He's funny. He is hilarious with my daughter. I mean, especially when he would play the game, if she would start making just the tiniest noise, I mean, he'd put that controller down, he'd pick that kid up, and he'd focus all on her. He wouldn't go back to that game till she was asleep, or, I mean, all his attention and focus, I could definitely say, is very much on Harmony. He cares and loves her so
So what
much.
about the kind of things like diaper changing, feeding,
Oh,
bath
yeah.
time, all of that?
He's done every single one of those things.
And how long has it been since Harmony's been able to see him?
Since November the 6th of 2020.
And is she able to talk with him on the phone?
Every time she gets on the phone, she gets so excited to hear her daddy's voice.
Do you think that he's a positive influence in her life?
Most definitely, yes, ma'am.
And do you think that, how do you think if he goes to prison and he's not in her life for the next couple of years, how do you believe that will affect your daughter?
Not just will this affect her emotionally, it'll affect her for the rest of her life. I do believe. I know what it feels like to not have a dad. And one of my main goals in life was, if I were to ever have a kid, I'd want that dad around that baby more than ever.
So you mentioned, I'm going to cut you off there. You mentioned some difficulties that you had in your family. You've had some mental health issues, including bipolar disorder. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you and I have known each other for a while because our kids are because you're the same age as my son. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so the postpartum depression, I think what you were saying is that it was pretty much expected because of your mental health issues that you've had growing up. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I want to get to the incident that is one of the violations that Adrian is charged with and the judge has found to be true. And that is the two new offenses, the lying to the police about the broken window and the broken door, and then subsequently the resisting arrest. So I want to talk about the police, lying to the police first. Can you tell the court what was going on and what happened that made you guys, or that prompted you guys to lie to the police in that occasion?
At this time, we were involved with CPS.
Let me stop you there. Okay. So were you involved with CPS based on anything that you or Adrian had done with the baby?
No, ma'am.
How were you involved with CPS?
Because of my disabilities, my mental health, and because of Adrian's background, they wanted to see that if we were stable enough to take care of our daughter.
Okay. And you had been involved with CPS as a child basically your whole life, is that right? With your family. So you're on their radar and they know who you are and that kind of thing, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then so when you had the baby in the hospital, did CPS come out to see you?
They came into the room immediately after she was born.
Okay. And so did they find out at that time that Adrian had a sex offense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So did they have to vet all of that to make sure that it was okay for the baby to go home with y'all?
Yes, ma'am.
And eventually did CPS let the baby go home with y'all?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, but there was an open case to see how you guys were going to do with the baby. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Did that, in addition to your postpartum, create even more stress having CPS involved?
Yes.
Okay. So you and Adrian had tried to get your own place, and you were living at this place where on 14th, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was a duplex?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And were you worried about being kicked out of that duplex?
Every day.
Okay. And is that because of number one, CPS?
Yes.
And number two, Adrian's requirements to register and to have a residence?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So was Adrian working at that time?
He was temporarily helping out at Domino's, which Tim Brooks was notified that by Adrian.
Okay, so when we say temporarily helping out, that sounded really weird to me. So can you tell the judge what you mean by temporarily helping out?
Yes. At that time, we had a friend named Tucker that worked up there, and he'd offered to help us out in case we wanted food or needed to just to get out of the house for a little bit. So he would have Adrian come up there and make a pizza and a brownie and help close for the evening, especially because they were low of staff, and he did it for free.
And so is this during a time that because of the COVID, Domino's was really low on staff?
Yes, ma'am.
And you guys were able to come up there and help out a little bit, cleaning and closing, and he'd give y'all pizza and other types of food. Is that right? Okay. So on this particular evening, what was going on?
I was sitting at home with Harmony, and I just started getting really quiet, started getting emotional, upset. And I texted Adrian and I told him, I was like, I can't keep doing this anymore. I'm a bad mom. I'm not taking care of Harmony. You're always there to take care of her. You're supporting her. And I just feel like I'm not doing enough. And I told him, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I just give up. And say about 10, 15 minutes later, he pulled up at the house. That time it was worse. I will admit that I was trying to harm myself by the time he got there. Adrian had knocked on the door multiple times. I did not want him to come in. I wanted him to go away, actually. And then he had tried to go through the window, but that didn't work. And then he had tried to go through the door, which he busted down. Instantly, he took Harmony. I was on the floor. He took the object that was in my hand away from me. And from there, we kind of just we're like, what are we gonna do now? You know, where are we gonna go from here? Because what is our landlord gonna do? And our neighbors at that time came by, Marissa and Joel, and I said, because I'm flipping out, like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna say? And she had mentioned, why not call the cops? Tell them it was a break-in, you know, for a backup in case Miss Abby needs to have evidence of what happened. And I was trying to rack my brain, trying to think, okay, what else can we say? What else can we, you know, do? And I couldn't think of anything. So we called the police department. We had made a false report that we had a break in. That night, Officer Michael Brooks came for the report, and I had made the false report. And before he left, I stopped him. I'm very close to Michael Brooks. I've known him for quite a few years, ever since I was very young. He's dealt with my family for years. I had told him finally the truth. I was like, okay, Brooks, before you go, I need to get this off my chest. I told him, I was like, we're already involved with CPS. I don't want them to take my daughter away. We've been doing so good this past year. We've been out of trouble. We've been doing everything that we can. We've got our own place, our own home. And he said, okay, I'm going to do what I can to help you. He was disappointed that I lied to him, but he called his supervisor. Supervisor came. They talked for about 15 minutes. The whole time I was praying to the good Lord that I didn't get arrested and CPS didn't take our kid away. And that night they told us that it was just dismissed. They didn't arrest us. They just told us to make sure that we notify the landlord the next morning, and they let us go. And about 2 weeks later, Adrian called from the probation office and told me that we have to report on Monday and that we had 2 warrants. And of course, I flipped out. Didn't like to hear that. And it was a Friday. My mother found out through my grandmother that we had warrants, and I didn't understand personally why we had warrants out for arrest if they didn't arrest us that night and they so-called dismissed it. So my mother, who is a 5-time felon, decides to call the police department. I called the police department. I apologize. And I had asked to have an officer come explain to me why we have a warrant if they dismissed it the night of the report. And that night, 2 officers pulled up, arrested me. I'm screaming and hollering to Adrian. I'm getting arrested. I'm resisting, by the way. And they put me in the cop car, and everything just escalated from there.
And so were you guys did Adrian tell you that he'd been told to report on Monday to the police department?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You stated that y'all were helping out at Domino's. Has Adrian worked previous to the Domino's situation?
Yes, he worked at Jack in the Box. He's worked at Church's Chicken. Since I've been with him, those are the places that he has worked that I know of.
Okay. Has Adrian tried to get jobs that would provide a little bit more than fast food jobs?
All the time. He gets emails every day. He tries to apply for as much applications as he can.
Is it difficult for him based on his sex offense?
Yes, ma'am. Very difficult.
Do you also, what kind of transportation do y'all have, Barbara?
At that time, we did not have any transportation. We'd go by foot. Now Miss Rose is our transportation currently.
Okay. You mentioned something about pulling up, that Adrian pulled up. Do you know how he pulled up to the house that night?
Yes, ma'am. Tucker had dropped him off.
Okay. So what are you, if the judge decides, first of all, are you asking the judge to continue Adrian on probation?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
How will it affect your family if Adrian is sent to prison?
It will affect us tremendously. I've waited 6 months for him to come home to his daughter, to me, his family. We miss him desperately. It will
Now,
really affect us.
I'm sorry.
It will affect us very much. Yes, ma'am.
If Adrian is continued on probation, what are y'all's plans as a family? How long you plan on staying with Miss Sullivan, and what's the next step?
Well, we had talked about recently, first we want to work on paying off his probation. We've talked about that for quite some time, but now that I'm more financially stable, we can do better with that. He plans on coming home, getting a job that he can do well with, and provide for his family. I mean, he goes to probation like he's supposed to, goes to his classes. But I do believe we will be making more payments for sure.
Now, you're living with Miss Sullivan. Are you paying any kind of rent or anything there?
Yes, ma'am.
What are you paying there?
I pay $350 out of my Social Security check.
How much do you get from Social Security?
$794.
And is that based on your disability?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the bipolar disability?
Yes, ma'am. And a couple other things, but that's the main one. Yes.
Okay. And so you're not able to work based on your disabilities, is that right?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So first order of business, you plan on helping Adrian to pay off his probation, correct?
Absolutely.
And are y'all also hoping to be able to save for a vehicle so that he can maybe get a job at Sterilite or one of those other companies in Ennis that employs felons?
Yes, ma'am. We plan on getting a vehicle as soon as possible. That way we can be more independent and have transportation for our daughter instead of having to ask people for rides. We really want to be more responsible and independent,
Right.
especially for our daughter.
Is there anything else that you want the judge to know when he's making this decision?
Adrian Sullivan is a very good young man, kind-hearted, funny, extremely loving. He's changed my life. I know that's hard to understand, but I've done so much better with him in my life, with his family in my life. His support is beyond words. My family was never there for me, and since day one, he's always been there. Even through our tough days, that he is still there no matter what. And I'm very grateful for that. And I just pray that you can give him a second chance.
Thanks, Barbara. I'll pass the witness.
Ms. Moore, you asked the judge to give him a second chance. How many chances has he had so far?
I'm not sure, ma'am.
So you know he was arrested on a sexual assault of a child in or around 18, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you know he also had another charge of sexual assault of a child after that, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And then he got the credit card abuse. And he was
Yes.
also put on probation for that, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So he's already had 3 opportunities.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this, the characterization of that testimony. I know Ms. Schumer has just been thrown into this, but I believe the court is aware that the dates are kind of switched around on those, that those cases were based on cases that occurred prior to the first charge.
I'm not asking specifically about I'm asking about her knowledge of them more than the dates, Your Honor.
Okay. If that's what it is, I'll overrule. But Ms. Watkins, I also understand in the previous hearing, about the date issue.
Right.
Thank
So you understand he's been on probation or deferred probation for 5 years now, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that time, the option for him to take advantage of help has been there. And he has not taken advantage of that help.
I do believe he does. He goes to his classes like he's supposed to. He sees Robert every Tuesday. That is a class for sex offenders that he goes to.
Are you talking about Robert, the person who wrote a letter to the judge saying that he had multiple significant disclosures of 2019 polygraph, continued use of pornography, multiple sexual partners, and consuming alcohol weekly? Are you talking about the same Robert Sanez?
Yes, ma'am. Mhm.
So he's going to see him, but he's not following the rules.
I never said that. I will say that he's definitely changed. since
Okay,
I-
so you're saying that he's, just because he goes, that makes it okay.
I never said that.
Okay, so then why does him going make him a better person if he continues to disregard the rules?
He's not disregarding the rules. I believe he's still doing what he's supposed to, going to his meetings like he's supposed to, registering like he's supposed to, seeing his probation officer like he's supposed to. The financial problem of paying off probation was a problem for quite some time because of our financial stability, but we are working on that. And just to clarify,
So let me ask you a question. If he's not working and you're living off of just your Social Security, how then do you afford marijuana?
marijuana, he doesn't smoke.
Does he tell you he doesn't smoke?
He hasn't smoked since I've gotten with him. He has
Yeah, he
completely
smoked
smoked. He has
before he
completely
got with
stopped.
you.
He stopped smoking before then, yes. And he doesn't drink.
Okay, so in his probation, he tells them that he doesn't drink, but then in his polygraph test, it says he does, because he lies about it.
Okay, let me go ahead and clarify this. He's not an alcoholic. If he does drink, it would be once every couple of months, and I go with him to the gas station to get the drink with him.
Okay, and then,
And it's
okay. So most of you don't go with him to these meetings or anything, do you?
actually I do. I've walked up with him to go to probation. I walk up there to go with him to his class meetings. I'm there for him. I'm
Do
supporting
you
him.
go into the class meetings with him?
No, ma'am. If I could, I would. I'd like to. That'd be stuff for me to learn as well.
Do you receive other help? Your
Yes.
family, as in you, Mr. Sullivan, like TANF, food stamps, Medicaid, anything like that?
I have Medicaid automatically through my Social Security, and yes, I do receive food stamps.
Okay, but you don't receive TANF or housing assistance?
No, ma'am.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Watkins, anything further of this witness?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Do you have any other witnesses?
We call Adrian Sullivan.
Does anyone need to take a 5-minute recess?
Yes, Your Honor, please.
All right, let's take a 5-minute recess.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I didn't bring you solar. What do you think the other day? Stay in your room. Real good. Today be Friday. No more. No more.
All right, let's go see. Tamara, you ready for Mother's Day?
I guess so. I don't think my kids are gonna be able to come in.
Where they live?
Graham's at Texas Tech, and he's
Oh.
in the middle of finals.
Oh, yeah.
And Grayson is in Austin. He works for a AMD, a chip company, tech company, and he just had somebody run into his car in the parking lot, and so he's trying to work on getting that fixed. So I don't know if he's going to want to drive his wrecked car up here or not. And he was just here for Easter, so I don't know. So I guess
Well,
I'll just be.
sometimes I think it's easier if you just say, okay, so in June, we're gonna celebrate Christmas through Memorial Day. And in September, we'll celebrate everything else.
Yeah. Well, so my mother and my husband's mother, so we got to do something for them. So pretty much story of my life. Mother's Day, I just do for other people.
Yeah, my husband's brother passed away last year in September of COVID related to other health issues. And so this is the first year that they're doing Mother's Day without the oldest. So it ought to be a lovely time.
Yeah.
Leslie, are you back?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. We'll come out of recess, and I forgot where we were.
About to call Mr. Sullivan.
Okay. Ms. Watkins was?
Yes,
I
sir.
had called Mr. Sullivan, yes.
Okay. Sir, you want to raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. Make sure you speak loud enough so I can hear you and everybody else can hear you. All right. You may proceed.
Okay. Good morning, Adrian.
Morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm doing well.
Okay. So you've been sitting there in the Navarro County Jail since when? It's been about almost exactly 6 months. Is that right?
183 days.
Okay. So first let's, and you just recently had a birthday
Yes, ma'am. April 21st, last month.
and you turned 24. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You, it's been characterized that you've been on probation for 5 years, but that's not exactly true, is it?
It has not been 5 years yet.
Okay. So you were actually placed on probation for the first time in December of 2017. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you were on probation during 2018, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And during 2019, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you were arrested on these charges in September of 2020. Is that correct?
November.
November. So basically 3 years of probation until you were incarcerated, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, part of that time, because you were originally placed on probation on a case involving your relationship with a young woman. And then after you were on probation for about a year, you got rearrested on a case that had been filed but had occurred previous to your relationship with the first young lady. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How long did you spend in jail dealing with that case before you were released back on probation?
I believe it was about 3 months before I had a court date.
Okay. So in the middle of your probation and what you're trying to work on, you get arrested for that, which was not a violation because it occurred previous, but you still had to deal with it, sit in jail, wait for a court date, wait for the DA to figure out what they were going to do and all of that kind of stuff, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you were also in jail on the credit card abuse charge at the same time as you were in jail on that charge, or was that later?
That was after I was out for about 2 or 3 months, and then I got arrested again for the
That was
credit card abuse.
also something that had occurred way before the original time that you got on probation, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So it wasn't a violation either.
No, ma'am.
Okay. But you had to deal with that charge and taking care of that, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So when you got originally put on probation in December of 17, you had just turned 20 earlier that year. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, I want to go, now that we've kind of got that established, I want to go back to I want to talk about your health problems and a little bit about your learning disabilities. So I know Ms. Sullivan talked a little bit about your health problems. Do you have asthma?
Yes, ma'am.
And has that affected your life in any way?
My life?
Yes.
Actually, yes. It's eventually got better, probably around 2016 after I was forced out of high school. It got better, and then it started to get worse.
Okay. And does that kind of affect some of the jobs that you're able to do?
Yes, ma'am.
And tell me how that affects the jobs that you're able to do.
Well, when it comes to warehouse jobs, being around dust can affect my asthma very, very dramatically and cause me to either go into a severe asthma attack, and knowing that I can't carry my inhaler, my emergency inhaler with me on the floor can be a problem.
So have you had occasions in jobs that you've worked that you've had to quit because of your asthma, or that you've been fired for going to the nurse for your asthma?
Russell Stover's, I end up having to go to the nurse because they had me in the grinding room, which can be around 110 to 115 degrees. And I was in there for about 30 minutes to an hour. And the heat was too severe for me. So like I couldn't breathe. And when I went to the nurse, my blood pressure was high and I was also wheezing.
And so what happened with that job as a result of that?
The supervisor that was over my shift told me that he was going to have to let me go.
Okay. And has there been any other instances of jobs that you have had to leave because of your asthma?
Before probation, I went to True Value and I was there for about 3 to 4 hours. And I had an asthma attack due to the dust and passed out into the lobby.
Okay. And that was before you were placed on probation?
Yes, ma'am.
You're going to have to say yes or no for the court reporter, if you would. Employment, school history, you did not graduate from high school, is that right?
No, ma'am. And
how long did you go to school?
I made it all the way to ninth grade, I failed reading. I failed reading every grade during high school and prior grades before that. So I had to redo English class, English 1, English 2, and then eventually English 3 all over again, all the way up to 12th grade. And then I was forced out of the school after that.
Well, you say you were forced out. What does that mean?
So there was a conflict between me and the assistant principal, and we call him Coach Boware. I had a regular black shirt on, which I was allowed to wear due to the fact that I was in Turning Points. Turning Points is where we go get on computers to graduate early. And so I was going back to class. He told me to hurry up and go to class so I can put a jacket on. And I said, okay. So I started running, and then he said, no running in the hallway. So I started walking and told me to hurry up.
Okay. I don't think the judge wants to hear about high school issues. I'm just trying to figure out how long you stayed in school.
all the way halfway through 12th grade.
Halfway through 12th grade. Okay,
I was still technically a junior, but also a senior.
I gotcha. So you were technically a junior because you didn't have the credits to be a senior, but it was your 4th year in high school.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So has it caused you some, well, first of all, you talked about the reading. Did you have problems with dyslexia?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So have you had problems also with finding a good job because you don't have a high school degree?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that something that you want to go back and do, is to get your GED?
I do.
Okay. And would you be fine with the judge making that a condition of your probation that you get a GED?
That'll be completely fine with me.
Okay. Has it also affected your ability to get jobs because of your type of offense?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the judge what kind of what you've done to try to get employment since you've been on probation in December of 17.
The first time getting employment was from Diversified, which is a hiring company, just like InStaff across from Berkshire's. I filed there, and that's where I got from Russ Stovers because I wasn't allowed to work at Kohl's due to my background. And then after Diversified, I went on Indeed and started applying for jobs there. But it was always Russ Stovers that popped up. So eventually I started filling out paper applications, and I ended up going to churches. I worked at churches, but I didn't get enough hours. And they eventually put me as 1 day a week. And the pay was about $7.25, and that's not enough to support myself or my fiance.
So did you go somewhere after churches?
I went to Jack in the Box. They offered to pay me $8.75.
Okay, let's stop there. Did you just quit churches and say, well, I'm not getting enough money, so I'm not going to do that? Or did you find another job?
I told them before I left, I said, I put in another application at Jack in the Box. They offered more pay, so I'm going to be going to work there.
Okay, so you got another job somewhere else before you left churches?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and you went to Jack in the Box?
Yes, ma'am.
And you worked at Jack in the Box for, I think, according to your predispositional report, it's something like 4 or 5 months. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you have some issues with your asthma at Jack in the Box as well?
Yes, ma'am.
What was that?
At first, they had me on the fryer, which has nothing but heat coming from that. And I kept leaving to catch my breath to get air, and they didn't like that.
You mean leaving, like leaving the whole building, or just walking away from?
No, I walked to the lobby area.
Okay. So did you eventually leave Jack in the Box because of that issue that you were having with the fryer?
Yes.
And did they eventually call you back to come and say that you could do another job there without the fryer? Okay.
Yes.
All right. But you eventually ended up leaving Jack in the Box too, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what was the problem there?
They cut down on my hours also at Jack in the Box.
Okay. Did you find another job from Jack in the Box?
No. Churches would not take me back because of my background. And then eventually Jack in the Box, it became over new management, and she will not take me back because of my background now.
Okay. And is this kind of happening? When was all of this occurring, in the COVID in 2020 or before that? Yes. Or what?
During the COVID.
Okay. So during 2020.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that right? Okay. Now, during this time, you have met and started a relationship with Miss Moore. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's been characterized that she's your fiance. What are your plans with respect to Miss Moore?
I am planning on to settle down and get married.
And when are you going to do that?
Before the official marriage, we're going to have to get ourselves stable financially and physically so we can provide for our daughter before we make any rash decisions.
So when you say get stable, you've heard your grandmother testify that you can live there with her. Is that your plan for the immediate future, is to live with your grandmother to try to save money and get yourself on your feet?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, why didn't you just live here through your grandmother from the very beginning? Did you feel like you needed some independence in being a young man and all?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And but at this point, do you realize that that would be the best place for you to be able to catch up and get on your feet?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So are you willing to stay there for as long as it takes to be able to get financially independent, to be able to go to a house of your own?
Even if it takes longer than what expected.
Okay. What about employment? What are your prospects for employment if the judge lets you out and you get placed back on probation?
So it was probably a week ago that my fiance talked to the assistant manager at Domino's, and he was saying that I can go back to volunteer there. He will pay me in cash, and I will start saving that up for probation, personally, just for probation. And once I do that, I'm going to eventually find a better job than just Jack in the Box or churches.
So you understand, and you and I have talked about the numerous jobs that are available in restaurant industry because people, I mean, they're just short-staffed, and your experience with Domino's in that. Are you willing to get a job that pays a little bit less and those jobs to make ends meet, to do what you need to do to get your probation?
I'm willing to do that.
Okay. And can you tell the judge that you will do everything that you can to get a job when you get out?
That is my main priority.
Okay. So main priority is what?
So whenever I am released, I will go find another job. I will. My first place that I thought about was the Chick-fil-A that they just got built here, either there or Burger King. I used to work there years ago.
Okay. Are you hopeful that with a GED and with some transportation that you can get a job at some companies that maybe pay a little bit more?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. What companies have you looked at that you think you could get a job with if you had that?
I've looked into Hibbett Sports. I've also looked for jobs that require work from home, and also game creating. I have to have a GED or a high school diploma to even qualify for that, and that's the only qualification I need that's left.
Okay. And I've mentioned Sterilite and others, and I got that from you. What about those jobs that are up there in Ellis County area? What have you learned about them?
I didn't have transportation to those, but they do hire felons. At one point, Sterilite did fire all felons, but they're rehiring felons now.
Okay. So would you be, once you got transportation, would you be willing to look into that? Or are you planning on looking into that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I want to talk about your violations of your probation. You heard Barbara's account of what happened with the false report. Specifically with regard to the false report, what have you learned from that? What do you have any regrets about how you handled that situation?
Honestly, I do have major regrets, because usually when I get upset, I get quiet, and then if I'm by myself and I can't talk to anybody and my anger prolongs, I have to hit the wall to calm myself down. I used to cut myself a lot, self-harm.
Well, I'm not asking about that. I'm asking about y'all's choice that you made to report to the police that you got a break-in.
Yes, I regret that choice. Yes.
And what was going through your mind with that?
I believe that if I could have did it over again, I would. But during the moment that it happened, I just knew that Well, I messed up once again.
Okay. So why, I mean, you've heard what Barbara said, but in your own words, why did y'all lie to the police?
To keep from being kicked out of the house because we were already on the verge with the landlord due to the light bill.
Okay. And were you worried about CPS and your probation if you were to get kicked out of the house?
Yes, very much.
Okay. Now, I know you've talked about, to me, the resisting arrest charge. And I think, again, Barbara kind of went over that, but were you expecting to turn yourself in on that false report charge?
Yes, ma'am.
And Barbara said that you had called her from probation. Did you learn about the warrants from probation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so did you discuss with Mr. Brooks that you would turn yourself in on those charges?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And was it your expectation after speaking with him that you were going to do like a time served and a jail sanction
Yes, ma'am.
on that was what was going to happen to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But then whoever, Barbara, called the police to find out whether she had a warrant and why she had a warrant, and then the police ended up coming out and arresting y'all. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, you were additionally charged with resisting arrest, and I believe the testimony was in the previous hearing that you were wanting to get a shirt, and that then the officer said no, and you and reached for your arm and you pulled away, and then you ended up on the ground. Why were you insistent on getting a shirt? What was going through your mind at that time?
We had clothes on the ground right next to the door when the door was open. And I asked to get a shirt. And I've been arrested multiple times whenever either I'm half naked or I just have underwear on, and they've allowed me they watch me get dressed. They'll come to my bedroom or they'll stand there in the hallway and they will watch me and make sure I'm not doing anything or trying to escape.
And so were you just not understand? I mean, what were you just surprised that the
I was
officer?
surprised that it happened.
Okay. Were you knew you were going to be arrested on the charge and you planned on turning yourself in, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you intentionally or try to harm the officers in any way?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So what exactly did you do to resist?
Whenever I was on the ground, they were both on top of me at that point. So I couldn't really get my arms up, but they couldn't flip me over during the time I was on my back. And once they did flip me over, my right arm was stuck under my daughter's walker.
Okay.
And I believe that what made it worse, because since my arm was stuck under there, I don't think they realized that it was right there.
Okay. Other violations that you had, and I think you've talked about the not paying. Did you all have the money for you to pay on any of your probation at any time?
When I did have money, it was usually to either rent or bills.
Okay. And I believe you said you had problems paying your rent and bills too. Is that right?
Yes, the light bill was a little over $400, and then the rent was $600.
Okay. Was there anything left over after bills for you to pay any on your probation?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now, going forward, you've said that probation will be your number one priority. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Has this, let's go over some of the other violations. Okay. So you and I talked about your sex offender counseling, and you heard what Robert said in that letter. Is that something that happened? Talk about your attendance from the very beginning. what is your characterization of your attendance at the meetings?
Well, at the beginning, I misunderstood the paperwork. It was requiring me to go once a week, and instead of going once a week, I went once a month. And
And when you talk
eventually,
about at the beginning, we're talking about in 2018, right?
yes,
Okay. So how long did it take you to get that remedied?
I did a 15-day sanction requested by Brooks that I turn myself into the jail and do a 15-day sanction. I sat 15 days, and after I got out, I've been going to class every week after
Okay.
that.
Okay. So the letter says that there's been some non-attendance. What is your explanation for that? Is that just from 18, or are there other occasions where you've had non-attendance?
Every time I've been arrested, I've been discharged, and I've noticed that it's been counted as non-attendance.
Okay. So when you say you've been arrested, so you were arrested first on that sexual assault charge that actually occurred previous to what you were placed on probation for, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were in jail for 3 months on that,
Yes, ma'am.
right? And then a couple of months later, you were arrested again on the credit card abuse that actually occurred previous to your original probation. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And were you discharged on those occasions as well?
No, I was in jail for 1 day on the credit card abuse, and I bonded out and was continuing class.
Okay. But the first time you were discharged because you were in jail for those 3 months.
I was already in jail, and I got discharged, I think, a week after I was already in jail.
Okay. So there are also some allegations that are related to that counseling, but also just other violations. Number one is drinking. What are you thinking about drinking while you're on probation? Why would you do that? Well, let me strike that. Strike that. Do you admit that you did drink occasionally while you were on probation?
Yes, not
Okay.
every day, not every month. No.
Okay. So at the time, did you feel like that was a serious violation?
No, ma'am.
What is your understanding of that now?
I believe that taking that route could put me in more trouble. And honestly, I don't even see myself doing that anymore. And as Robert has explained to me, we during class, we have these moments, the breaking moments where we just can't do it anymore, and we just crack under pressure.
And do you
And
think
so,
that's
yeah.
what having a drink every now and then was about?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you feel like that through counseling that you will have the tools, or that you're learning to do other things and not drink?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Pornography. What is your explanation for your use of pornography?
Like I've
What-
learned. Go ahead.
What have you learned about that?
I learned that it's addictive. It's just like any drug, any serious drug in the world. It can be very addictive because it causes a high that is in your brain. And I learned that through being in therapy, that once you get addicted, it's harder to stop than to, go right back to it. It's easier to go back to an addiction than it is to stop an addiction.
What is your feeling about pornography in general? I mean, a lot of people think it's just no big deal and everybody does it, but other people think it's really bad. So what is your opinion at this point on pornography?
I believe pornography is just another way for people to, I guess, find certain type of pleasures. But at the same time, it's also wrong because it's mainly men that sexually objectify the characters that are on the videos or on the pictures. And I believe that during the time that I was doing that, all I cared about was what was going on. I didn't care about who it was or really what their names were.
And so is this something that you have been taught in counseling that that you need to think about as to why pornography is not good for you and not good for society in general?
Yes, it's empathy, having empathy for others, even if you don't know them.
So before you were discharged from probation, from counseling, you were put on a no or a zero tolerance. But had you had an opportunity to see whether that was going to work or not?
No,
Or
I
did you
did
just
not.
get arrested and go to jail for?
I end up getting arrested and going to jail.
Okay. So are you committed to not viewing pornography? Yes,
ma'am.
Okay. Now, you've stated a few things that kind of make it seem like you're getting something out of that therapy. What exactly have you learned and are you getting out of your sex offender therapy?
I've learned by taking, like at first, my offenses, he was telling me that it's better to start taking responsibility, but in my head, I was thinking that, I never hurt anyone. I didn't do anything bad. Why am I going through this situation? Why am I having to register? But as I progressed through class, I started to realize that, I have hurt those people, even if it's not physically. I've hurt them mentally. And I also can say that I hurt myself due to what I've done to them and what the therapy that they went through. And I've also learned by how pornography is addictive, like an addictive drug. I don't really know the word to say the high that you feel whenever you're either masturbating or anything else. I don't know that word to explain it, but I've learned that during the time I've been in class. I also had an opportunity to do a couple sheets of homework, which one of them I didn't get to finish. It was on sexual history. And I believe there's a lot that I would like to explain on that paper if I get the chance.
Things that you would like to work through with your sex offender counselor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Adrian, tell me about your daughter.
Harmony's honestly like my little twin. She looks exactly like me in every which way. I was never there for her. I was never there for her birth. But
Let me back up there. You say you weren't there for her birth. Did you want to be?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you not allowed to be there because of your sex offender classification?
Yes, ma'am. Tim Brooks requested a note from her OBGYN, but her OB said that she needed to get the approval from the people that are over the hospital, and they said no. So Brooks also said no, and I did not go to the birth.
Okay. But you did you support Barbara throughout the pregnancy and help her with everything that you could?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then so you're just saying that it was hurtful for you to not be there when she was born?
Very much.
Okay. So after the birth, you tell the judge what you did with the baby and how you helped out, what you did.
The day she got out of the hospital 2 days after the birth. And so after that, we probably were out at my grandma's for about 2 hours. And then we finally went home. She was asleep. I watched the baby all day. And then eventually the baby fell asleep and I went to sleep.
Well, I'm
And
not
when
talking about like a day by day. We don't have that much time, but just in general, how have you been involved in taking care of Harmony?
I was the main person taking care of her for 5 months.
And why was
Her
that?
first 5 months, due to Barbara's C-section still healing, and also it was bleeding a lot too. There was still blood coming out of her C-section. And I didn't want her having to worry about getting up and down to go check on the baby while she was in the crib. So I would stay there.
Go ahead.
I would stay up night and day just to watch over her.
Did she also have some postpartum depression that y'all were having to deal with?
Very much. And there's been times where I couldn't be around her. I didn't want to be around her, and I wanted her to like go take some time out, go to her grandma's or something, but she didn't do that. So I just had to get used to it and continue my day.
Okay. So are you asking the judge to continue you on probation, Adrian?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you think this last 6 months in jail has affected you?
Honestly, since I've been here, I've showed myself that I've matured a lot in these past 6 months, and that I know for a fact that if I get another chance on probation, and then if and I pray not that I mess up on that one, that's my final chance. And there's no going back on that one. There's been times that I've been in here and I've told myself I give up, and then about an hour later, I'm okay. I'm talking on the phone to my daughter. I'm talking on the phone with my grandma, and they're saying everything's going to be okay. And I realized that it is all right. I'm doing better than I was at first. And I'm
So
ready.
do you think that this jail stint has caused you to even more so realize the seriousness of this probation, and that any little tiny thing is going to get you revoked?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. At the beginning, when you were, I guess, 19 and originally put on probation, or just turned 20, did you really grasp the severity of that?
No, ma'am.
But do you grasp the severity of it now?
Very much.
I'll pass the witness.
Ms. Schumer?
Mr. Sullivan, you have a habit of lying to people whenever you think you're in trouble, based off of, you lied to the police officer about the break-in, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you lied to Mr. Brooks about alcohol use, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you lied to the parents of the 15-year-old child when you told them you were 16 and not 20, correct?
I don't remember that.
Okay. You talk about not doing bad things, but if you lie about what you're doing, does that not indicate to you that you know something's wrong if you have to lie about it?
That does indicate it.
Okay. And so you want the court to believe that even though you've lied to police officers, you've lied to your probation officer, you've lied to the parents of these children that you had sex with, that now all of a sudden everything's going to be perfect in your world. You're not going to lie anymore. You're going to follow all the rules, not just the ones you want to follow. Is that what you're telling the judge?
I misunderstand what you're saying, that I lied to the parents.
When in the report, it says that they asked you how old you were when you had sex with the 15-year-old, and you said you were 16. But you were
I
actually,
don't remember that.
okay. So when you get in trouble, is your first instinct is to tell the truth?
Usually, yes.
Okay, but your pattern presented to the court in these hearings and in these documents says you have a pattern of lying first, and then saying, oh, I made a mistake.
Objection, argumentative. I don't think it's a question.
I'll withdraw, Your Honor.
Okay.
So are you saying that Mr. Brooks did not explain to you when he met with you the first time and probation, that Mr. Brooks did not explain to you all the rules? That he didn't explain to you that attendance was necessary each week or each month or however often? You're telling the court he did not tell you this.
He explained it to me, and also Robert did too.
Okay, but yet you said that you didn't understand when you
I
first.
misread the paperwork.
Okay, but even though they told you you're supposed to report weekly, you read the paperwork and decided that you thought it meant monthly?
Yes.
Okay, so when Mr. Brooks explains to you that you can't have any alcohol, or you can't have any firearms, or you can't get into trouble, did you misunderstand that as well?
I don't have any firearms.
But you drank alcohol, right?
Not every day or every month.
But you drank it, yes?
There's been a couple hiccups here and there.
It's just a yes or no question, Mr.
I
Sullivan.
just said that there's been a couple hiccups here and there.
So you drank alcohol and lied about it, correct?
On the second time, yes.
When the officer told you that he did not want you to go get your shirt, why did you not just follow the rule?
He
The
didn't tell
rule
me he
was,
didn't want me
I
to
tell
get
you
my
what to
shirt.
do, you do it. Why did you not follow that rule?
Dunnigan wasn't the one talking. Brooks' son was talking to me first. I asked him before Dunnigan even walked up to the door, is it okay if I get a shirt? He said, hold on. When Dunnigan came to the door, he came to me with aggression. In his voice, you can hear the aggression from him. And he
But
was
you were
telling me
given
no.
a specific rule. The rule was, no, you cannot go get a shirt.
Objection,
You
Your Honor,
chose
that's a
not to follow
mischaracterization
it.
of the testimony. I don't think anybody ever said that he specifically said that.
I'll sustain, rephrase.
Did you follow all the rules that were given to you, the commands that were given to you by the officers in the night in question?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Any other witnesses to call?
No, Your Honor, the defense would rest.
State have any witnesses to call?
Your Honor, if I could call Mr. Brooks as a rebuttal witness.
Sure. Mr. Brooks, if you can raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, you may proceed.
Mr. Brooks, in your many years of dealing with probationers, do you give them verbal direction on what they are allowed to do and not allowed to do when they meet with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you go over the rules with them when they meet with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you give them a generalization like you can't do anything wrong? Or do you give them specific things?
We talk about specific things and situations.
And what specific rules or was Mr. Sullivan given regarding attendance and alcohol use and reporting.
Whenever he was placed on original probation, he was read all the conditions of probation. He read them. I read them to him. He initialed them. He stated he understood them. Part of those rules are he's to report to probation as directed, at least once monthly, but as many times as we need him to report. He was told he had to attend and successfully complete sex offender counseling. And he has rules in sex offender counseling that he has to abide by also.
So did he follow some of the rules?
Yes, ma'am, some of them.
Okay. But he didn't follow all of them, correct?
No, ma'am.
In probation, if you find out that someone has lied to you about any of the rules that they broke, what is the first thing that you normally do?
We normally will start off with a verbal reprimand and then go from there.
And if the verbal reprimand doesn't work, then what do you do?
Then we have sanctions that we follow, which include can include making them report more often. We can require them to take additional classes, and we can require them to we can even go up to a jail sanction and up and including to filing a motion to revoke on them.
And was Mr. Sullivan given any reprimands?
Yes, ma'am, he was.
And was he given any sanctions?
Yes, ma'am, he was.
And now we're on the third step, which is the motion to revoke, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
In the PSI that you did with Mr. Sullivan, I believe it stated that he stated to you that he didn't drink alcohol, correct?
May I refer to the report?
Yes.
He does admit to the use of alcohol, ma'am, but and he also admitted to the use of THC as a juvenile. His last THC use was at 18. He denied any other drug use.
Okay. And was Mr. Sullivan given any hair strand tests, any UAs, anything like this?
Yes, ma'am, he was.
And were any of those positive?
Not for narcotics, no, ma'am.
Okay. In regards to his, I believe we've already been over this, but I just want to make for sure I'm understanding correctly. He was given 2 opportunities to go to sex offender program treatment, correct?
Yes, ma'am. He was unsuccessfully discharged prior to, I believe, the new offenses, and because he failed to attend, and we gave him a jail sanction. And once he completed the jail sanction, he was re-enrolled in sex offender counseling.
And he failed to complete that one too, correct?
Yes, ma'am. He was unsuccessfully discharged.
And when they are in jail, is that part of, does that cause them to, get in trouble for missing attendance or count against them in their probation, other than the actual charge?
No, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Tim, I'm not sure if we went over this previously in the prior hearing, but I just want to touch base on it again in case we did not. It's been some time. But the plan was, well, first of all, you had not intended on violating or filing a motion to revoke against Mr. Sullivan until he got arrested on the resisting arrest charge. Isn't that correct?
We had planned on doing alternative sanction, yes, ma'am,
Okay.
prior to the additional charge of resisting arrest.
Of resisting arrest. I'll pass the witness.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any other witnesses from the state?
No, Your Honor, state rests.
I'll take closing arguments.
Your Honor, following the rules is something that keeps society safe. It's something that keeps the community safe. If we all decided that we wanted to stop at red lights, but we didn't want to stop at stop signs, that's still not following the rules. And I understand that Ms. Morgan says that he followed the rules when he reported each time that he changed addresses or phone numbers or whatever. And following some of the rules does not negate the fact that you did not follow all the rules. I understand that some of this, all these things happened in a sequence that is probably typically not normal of what someone gets in trouble and then gets in trouble and then gets in trouble. However, Mr. Sullivan has been given opportunity after opportunity to address the issues that he has when it comes to his problems with pornography. He's been given opportunities to tell the truth, and he has chosen to lie about it. If we, as a society, say to each other, well, you can follow the rules that you like, you can follow the rules that are comfortable for you, you can follow the rules that you agree with, then that sets a precedent for everybody else to go, okay, I can only follow the rules that I want to follow. Putting him back on deferred or probation sends a message that as long as you follow the rules you want to, or just some of the rules, that's okay, because we really didn't mean for you to follow all these rules. We just wanted to give you these rules to see which ones you wanted to do. Mr. Sullivan himself, he alone makes the choices in his life. He's the one who chose not to work with the program, not to abide by the rules that probation has set at. He has made it a point that if there's a situation where he might not get caught in a lie, then he's going to lie, like he did with Mr. Brooks originally, and say, he's not reporting that he's using alcohol. But then he gets to the lie detector test, the polygraph, and it says, yeah, there's an indication that he is using alcohol. He lied to the police about the break-in because that was the convenient thing, and maybe we wouldn't get caught doing that. It seems to be a pattern that when he sounds good, but all we have to do is either take his word or we have to take his actions. And at this point, his actions are saying, I'm going to abide by the rules that I think I can do, or that I agree with, or that I want to do. But the rest of them, not so much. So the state is asking that the court not place him back on probation or place him back on deferred. And we will leave any sentencing up to the discretion of the court. We do understand that Mr. Sullivan has had medical issues. However, medical issues do not excuse criminal activity. It also does not excuse lying. It also does not excuse having sex with children when you're a grown adult. Ms. Watkins referred to one of the victims as a young lady. One of them was 14, one of them was 15, and he was 18 and 20. So these were not young women, these were children. And so we would ask that his sentence, that his probation and his deferred probation be revoked.
Ms. Watkins?
So, Your Honor, at the beginning of this hearing, I asked the court to focus on three different things. Number one, the original charges. Number two, the violations and the explanations for those. And number three, Mr. Sullivan's character and family and his future plans. So I'd like to address each of those three things and what the evidence has shown. First of all, the original charges. I know Your Honor said that they were voluminous, the offense reports that you had received. But if you look at those offense reports, and I think you understand the nature of the dates that were involved there, but we are talking about a time when Adrian was 18 and the young lady in question was 14. That was the first offense in time, but the second that he was placed on probation for. The second one, he was 19 19/20. And the victim in that case was 15. These were both consensual relationships. I understand that we as a society have deemed that that 4 years is too much of an age difference when you're talking about a 14 or a 15-year-old. That's not been, the case in society forever, but it is now. And I think when we look at sexual assault of a child cases, and we look at the range of the types of offenses that we see, from the worst pedophile that could possibly exist, this is on the bottom end of that scale. I think Mr. Sullivan has really, probably more so than me, I guess, learned from his sex offender therapy that that he needs to take responsibility for these original charges, whereas maybe originally he didn't quite see the severity of them. And I think that's commendable, because I would say I probably need some of that therapy because I'm not quite there yet. But if we look at those original charges, we have to ask ourselves, is this the kind of charge that we really want to be sending someone to prison for? And I would submit to the court that this is the reason that he got probation in the first place, and deferred probation in only 5 years in the first instance, because we realize that we want for people to be able to come back from this type of charge. Yes, we've decided as a society that this should be a crime. And certainly I think we could probably all admit that these young women, and I will continue at 14 and 15 to say young women, but these young women, these young ladies were not ready for a sexual relationship at that age. And I think we can all say that. But I would also suggest to the court that if it is at all possible, we should not be trying to put people in prison for this type of offense in this type of circumstance that Mr. Sullivan committed these offenses. I think it's clear from his testimony that he is getting something out of his sex offender therapy. He is learning. He is coming around to take responsibility. He is understanding the severity of this. I would ask Your Honor, when we talk about these violations, to realize and to really take a look at the fact that he was placed on probation when he was just turning 20. 20 years old, 20 to 23 years old, extremely difficult time for young men, particularly, and I think we can all say that from life experience from our own children. Extremely difficult time in learning who you are, in trying to get on your feet, and trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life. Mr. Sullivan has had the added difficulty, certainly not suggesting that it is not of his own accord, of his own fault, but the added difficulty of being a registered sex offender. And that is an extremely difficult type of probation to do, and it's extremely difficult type of requirements. Places where he can live, places where he can't live, all of the reporting requirements, places where he works, can't work. He does have the asthma. That does give him a little extra difficulty, not trying to make excuses, but he's had difficulties that we've tried to point out in his life. He is now just turned 24. He has spent 6 months in jail. He has a child that he has stepped up to the plate, that he is trying to parent, that he's trying to be a good father for. He has a plan. I think it is clear to his family members that he has matured Hopefully he's matured since 20. But that's a process. And I think this last 6 months in jail has probably accelerated that process. He doesn't come in here angry. He doesn't come in here, wondering why this is happening to him. He is coming in here taking responsibility and saying that he wants to be given the opportunity to do better. And I think that he, based on what he said today and based on what his family said, I think he's got a good chance at doing better on his probation. When you look at these violations, and I think it's sometimes kind of difficult to understand what, like the not attending was back early on in 2018, and then since he's been in jail now. But Mr. Brooks was not intending on filing a motion to revoke, but for that resisting arrest, which was simply put, Your Honor, Mr. Sullivan just not following what the officer said fast enough for the officers. Specifically, Kenny Dunnigan. That's my characterization, not Mr. Sullivan's. Actually, he said I didn't do what he said for me to do. But I think Your Honor can take into account the experience that we've had on that front. Mr. Sullivan has potential. He's not been on probation for 5 years. It's been, counting the jail time that he was in for the other charge, about 2.5. On behalf of his family, on behalf of Mr. Sullivan, I'm asking you, Judge, to go ahead and continue him on probation and give him another chance.
Thank you.
Quite frankly, I think he deserves that. Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything further from the state?
Your Honor, the state would just point out that this court has tried not to put him in prison. He was given an opportunity to do the right thing, to make the right choices, to not lie, to not drink, to not break any of the rules. While sitting in jail, yes, he is being more than happy to be responsible because he's incarcerated. However, he's shown that when he's not incarcerated, he's chosen to lie, he's chosen to drink, he's continued to violate the rules, watching porn, committing new offenses. And as a society, we either send a message that says it's okay to follow some of the rules, but not all of the rules. And I believe this court has tried to help Mr. Sullivan by putting him on deferred to start with for very serious crime. And so the state's willing to go with, if he wants time served for the state jail felony, the state is agreeable 100% with that. However, these other two crimes, they're there because they are so egregious, Your Honor. And again, 14 and 15-year-old girls are easily manipulated. It's not consensual, regardless of what they say. And the point needs to be made that behavior has consequences. Not following the rules have consequences. And with that, Your Honor, we rest and close. Finished.
I would like time to consider. I want to relook or reevaluate the PSI that was submitted. As I said, I read part of it. I've taken judicial notice of it, but I need to look at the offense reports that were part of that, so I know that I've done everything I'm supposed to do as far as reviewing that. And I would hope to have that done by today, and hopefully next week be able to issue a ruling on all three of these. So with that concludes this hearing.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Be excused, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. Y'all have a good weekend.